Victoria, as everyone knows, has been very active in the arts community in Houston, both as a patron, as an advocate, certainly as a collector. And she and Marshall co-founded Looking at Art in, wait a minute, 1989. Was it that long ago? Wow.
I was a teenager.
And you were, exactly. And I love what they've written here. Victoria sent this to me. But it says that together with her husband Marshall, co-founded Looking at Art in 1989, a non-quote-unquote profitable audience-building project that fosters dialogue and non-profitable. In addition to that, Victoria served on the Texas Commission for the Arts for a number of years and served as their chairman for 2 years, from 2005 to 2007. And just before Edward's presidency, Victoria was his predecessor as president of the board of the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. Everybody knows Victoria. And now it comes to my sweetheart. Edward attended the Art Institute of Houston. He received his Associate in Applied Arts in 1987. But he studied metal sculpting at the George Brown College in Toronto. Forgive me, you guys. I couldn't do this because I lost my voice until recently. And since 2000 at the Museum of Arts in Houston, Glassell, where he still continues to study. Edward is not here, but Edward studied with Carlos Cruz Diaz in, when?
About 5 years ago.
5 years ago, about a year.
No, it's just a semester.
A semester. He's been in numerous exhibitions, most recently the traveling exhibition La Frontera, which exhibited at the Museo Franz Mayer in Mexico City. Edward is currently the president of the board of the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. And we're delighted to say a member of Hooks-Epstein's gallery, and this is his second very important show, and we thank you all for coming. Let me just say one thing. I had dinner with David and Edward the other night, and I was talking about the show. Edward tells me that this show is smaller, or no, larger. Smaller than last year. It's smaller than last show. And I said, there's no way. There are 55 pieces in this show, but it's smaller than the last. Where did I put them? In this little tiny gallery.
Never closer together.
But Edward is so meticulous, not only in his work, but in what he presents to us. We know exactly where everything is going. We know how it's going. But I was asked what I personally think of Edward's work. When I first saw Edward's work many years ago, and I've followed his work for a long time, I always thought he was extremely talented, very sensitive to a lot of materials, very aware, and I love the work. But honestly, I didn't want to buy it. But I watched him grow. I think this body of work is probably the most mature body of work that I've ever seen Edward McCartney do. And I am so honored to present it to the public. I hope you like it as much as we do. No more.
Well, thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming today. I'm going to ask Edward a few questions, and then we can open it up for question and answer. Okay, yeah, there are a lot of pieces in this exhibition, and I know that this represents 2 years of work for you. And I just wanted to ask you if you could maybe give us an idea, kind of a roadmap of how your ideas evolve. Because I know you started, the show kind of starts with these pieces that still reference Carlos Cruz Diaz, and that references your earlier work, and then you took it from there and...
So yeah, I think I feel like that piece over there, the chromatic interference piece sort of leaves off from my last show. There was a piece sort of very similar to that. And I've been playing with the idea of the edge of objects and sort of visual kinetics, things that change when you look at them or you move around them, or if someone's wearing it, you move around them or they move. And so the paper and the cardboard were part of the last vernacular. And this time, I started doing that same edge treatment with like the pure cardboard pieces, which are further down the hall, called the cartoneros. And I learned the term while watching a show on Buenos Aires, where there's a whole group of people who collect cardboard. And I look at those, I come from an architectural background, interior design background, and they very much feel like a plan view to me, like it could be a Google Earth image or something. And I actually do go out and find the material.
We'll talk about that in a minute. Tell us how the progression of the
Okay,
work.
so the
Because
progression.
there's a lot of experimentation.
There's a lot of
in your work.
experimentation.
So it leads you from one thing to the next.
Leads from one thing to the next. So then you have cardboard, and then you start putting aluminum foil with cardboard, and then there's color. There's color and card and aluminum foil, and then there's aluminum, and then you start using the same edge technique with the found wood pieces, like the one on the very front wall, and then the wood becomes pure unto itself. And then the cut ends of the wood become the blue assemblages that are on the wall around the corner. And they're unified and painted in one color. These pieces are in that same, they're still using the cardboard, they're still using wood, but then plastic creeps in and color creeps in, and found objects. And found objects from my studio go into the boxes. The cardboard and the puzzle pieces end up on edge in the box in the middle. So to me, there's cut paper collage, which is and cut paper assemblages and stacked. And to me, there's the cards. Again, it's cardboard, plasticized, but on edge and slotted and put together. So to me, there is a line of connection that makes everything connect to one another. Not that, I don't know that everybody sees it immediately, but I do. I still also sometimes feel that line is not necessarily connected in maybe the one physical show, but it's connected over years. There could be a series of pieces where there is an object, say, I have one called Implements for Intangible Purposes. And so occasionally one of those crops up. So it becomes part of a longer series. So I work in sort of both those things. So in series for making a complete show, and series that kind of crop up during my process.
Okay, so let's talk about the materials and how you find them and collect them, and do you consider that part of your studio practice?
That's interesting.
And then after you find them, how do you alter them?
Okay.
Okay, cleaning, painting, quilling.
Well, I collect a lot, and I have friends who give me things and family that give me things. I have a friend who had a show many, many, many years ago, and there were pieces of his show left over. And there were lots of wooden things that he'd constructed. And he said, I'm going to throw them away, come get them. So I came and got them. there's a lot of that, those pieces that are put into this collection. I have a house over in Oak Forest, and I live in the Heights, and the houses around me are being torn down at an astronomical rate, and there's all of, I go to lots and start picking up shingles and things. I love cedar shingles and shakes. They have a wonderful texture and whatnot, and they're really hard to find. So I actually do go and collect materials. Even when I'm driving around the city, if I drive past a pile of trash and there's something good sticking out, and David hates to see me coming home with crap sticking out of the back of the car. Oh no, what's he dragging home now? I walk my dog a lot. The 3 drawers that are on the wall over there were found one night. Someone was cleaning out their garage, and I picked one up and carried it with me, and went back with the car and got the other 2. So there's a lot of that. The cardboard I pick up, the objects that are in the boxes, for the most part, are either objects that I've made that have been hanging around my studio. They're tools that I've made. They're objects that people have given me. They're things I've collected. The shells are, I've had family reunions for 20-some years at the same beach on off the coast of North Carolina. There's like shark's teeth in some of these boxes, and in this piece up here. And I collected those as a kid along the Potomac River when my grandmother had a beach house. So there's a lot of stuff in my studio. It's not completely visible to everyone who walks in because it's secreted away. But I know where it is. I spend a lot of time sorting plastic and colors and putting it in jars. So if I need a certain color piece of plastic, I go to the red jar and find it. The wood gets washed and cleaned, and I have to take rags and get the grime off of it. The cardboard I don't pick up unless it's pretty pristine and clean. So yeah. So.
You do a little painting. Some pieces are painted. Some pieces
no.
A little quilling.
The wood. Most of the wood is left in its natural state. So I'm pulling from a palette of that is. Of the materials that I found, and sometimes I go looking for, I need a blue piece of wood,
The cardboard is sometimes painted.
The cardboard sometimes is painted or printed, and a lot of the times if it has an interesting print on it, you can cut out around that image and use it for a texture. The cardboard can be manipulated, it can be torn, it can be curled, it can be quilled into circles, it can be scored and bent to make dimensional forms. It's very, it's very useful.
I wanted to ask you, with all this stacking and collecting and assembling, how do you get things to stay still?
And a lot of glue. I go through glue like you wouldn't believe. A lot of glue, a lot of persistence.
You want to talk a little bit maybe about this curve? Is it the piece just down here that has the boxes within the big box? There's the frame, but then there's the boxes and everything's stacked in it.
Those are slightly planned. There's sort of an idea of size, and High Gloss, where I over at Uptown Park, where I first showed my jewelry. They, for the years, have given me their old jewelry boxes. And so I saved their jewelry boxes and I started applying them in a field that I like. And then I adhere those to a board, and then I frame that board, and I paint it first to sort of unify it. And then I start with each cell, and I start filling that cell with a material. I've done a lot of filling of cells with each cell. It comes from a need for order for me. I like things orderly. When I was a kid, I used to build out of Lego little trays, and I would put my little precious things in the little places in the trays. And I I have a fascination with the classification of things, like taxonomy, like how things are classified in this world. And so I like things ordered, and I like them in their place. The color piece over there is really about the flow of color. And the green turns to blue vertically, the purple goes through red and orange and yellow to white. And then they blend that way, they progress, and they blend back and forth at the same time. So for me, it's a study in the progression of color, and the grid is a great way to organize that. There are many ways to organize visually, and the grid I tend to like a lot. It gives order immediately.
Okay, so we've been talking about grids and edges and rigid pieces. So I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about the recurrence of circles in your work, the card tricks and the radial neck forms, the Elizabethan ruff.
I didn't really, because my studio is really small, I often pack away pieces as I make them. Some things go into the house and they hang, and then, but sometimes I just have to get them out of the way. And like the card pieces were collapsed, they're about this big when they're collapsed into a sandwich. And so they weren't really present in my mind as these circular things until I took them to a framer and said, okay, I've got these, need to slot, let's figure out how to display them. And as part of my practice that I've noticed over many, many years is I do have this penchant for this radial neck form, which keeps reappearing. I've done it in paper doilies, I've done it in wood, I've done it in rubber, I've done it in pipe stems, I've done it in dolls' shoes, matches, many, many, many things.
Pool balls?
The ties, plastic ties.
Plastic ties, what did you say?
Pool balls?
Croquet balls.
Croquet balls, yeah.
There's a piece that's also radial over there made out of tea bags. And there's a large circle in the Revolution piece, the aluminum piece, and so it was just interesting. Not even subconsciously, it just keeps coming back.
It's like the yin and yang, those circles and
the grid.
And the grid, yeah.
And I think again, it's a way of organizing things. And so, and I guess that we're somewhat drawn, probably subconsciously, to certain ways to organize things.
Okay, and now I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about the jewelry, because you still make jewelry. Because that's how I first knew you as a jewelry maker, a maker of jewelry. And so I know that you've made some pieces for this show, but also in talking about that, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about what it means to you, what scale means to you vis-a-vis the human body.
Jewelry is where I started. And even when at the height of when I was making tons and tons of jewelry, there's always an object that needed to be made that I wanted to say something with that wasn't necessarily right for a jewelry format. And so it became a small metal sculptural object. And I think probably 4 shows ago, I really wanted to. It was about the Iraq War. It was about memorial and memorializing in memory. And I really started to diverge into some really large sculptural forms. But it was funny, they all were jewelry forms. At the end of the day, they were still a giant necklace or a giant brooch. And I've progressed even beyond that now, where the object does not have to relate to jewelry. But at the same time, I still like to make something that can be worn, because I think it's really interesting. I think the body as site for artwork is overlooked. People tattoo themselves, and people wear all sorts of things to adorn themselves. A lot of it can be commercial, but a lot of it can also be just art. And I feel like if you owned these 2 pieces, if they were really you love both of them. One could stay at home, one could go home. And I think there's a bit of a different way to experience something when it's larger and something when it's diminutive. I also think sometimes the diminutive can be almost a maquette for something grander. It could be an outdoor environmental piece. So, and because I like the kinetics of work where you move around it, I like the fact that the human body moves and that your perception of what you're seeing on the body changes with the movement of the person and you moving around it. I try not to think too much about reality, but sometimes I do. We all perceive reality in different ways, and it's important to me because what is real? And so I think it's interesting that we can all look at things and perceive them in different ways.
And so, but some of
Did I answer?
yes, but these pieces are actually they were made. The smaller pieces were made after the larger pieces, and they were made to mimic the larger pieces.
Some were and some weren't. They go both directions. So yes, at some point I thought, I want to make a miniature of everything in the show, and then that got just too many things to do. But I loved doing it. But the wooden pieces in there were always that scale. Now I see those as monumental pieces one day. They could be beautiful, outdoor sculpture. So it goes both ways. Sometimes there's a small scale inspiration. Sometimes there's a large scale inspiration.
Do you, when you're working on these pieces, do you do studies ahead of time, or you just go right? You know what you want to do, and you just do it.
It varies. Some things are really planned, and some things are just built. Sometimes I have an idea. Sometimes I start at one place, and the totem was built. I started, and I just.
You're talking about the
hanging piece in the corner, and I just made sections and stacked them, and it just happened. Very, very fluidly, really. The cardboard Cartoneros pieces with the cells, they happen very organically. The only thing planned about them is the dimension, then it's just a matter of fitting a puzzle. I have a long history of drafting. I was thinking about this morning as I took my first engineering drafting course in 7th grade, another one in 8th grade, another one in 9th grade. And then I had 3 years of architectural drafting in art school. And then I did architectural drafting my whole sales career. And I can draw if you give me a T-square and a couple of triangles. So there are certain things that are very planned, almost engineeringly planned, and certain things that are just very free. So it just sort of depends.
I wanted you to talk about the piece behind you, what things are made up, and I thought it was an interesting challenge that you had using ambiguous text to create an object, and that the objects talk about the found objects and also about this beautiful glove box.
So Charlotte Cosgrove, who I take some collage and assemblage classes with, has a project called The Thing, where she gives you words. And you don't know what the words are, but the words are something. And the words are real words, and they make up a whole of something. But you can't look them up, you can't figure out what they are, and you just go away and you interpret the words. And so you stare at the word, and one of the words is a bonnet gland. What is a bonnet gland? I don't know. I had a piece of paper mache that I had made that looked sort of red and kidney-like. It looked like a gland. And then I stitched a little white bonnet and put it on it. So there's a bonnet gland. And one of the items was a drain pipe. And I went up and asked my dad for one of his old pipes, and he gave it to me, and I drilled holes in it, and it's now a drain pipe. And then I chose to organize those words in sort of a grid and put them in a box. A box is another great way to organize ideas. And I found this pyrography box, burnt wood box. It's a glove box. And it's a nice archaic form. Certainly no one uses one now. So they're relatively useless, except if you're an artist. And covered the inside with paper and created all the little partitions within it and made all the objects to go in and labeled them. It's also beautiful at night. It lights up. There's a switch and there's a light in every little cell in there. It's quite nice. I still don't know what those things are. I've never bothered to look them up because it doesn't matter anymore. But I figure one day an engineer is going to walk by and go, oh, I know what that is. That's a blender or something. Those are the parts of a blender or whatever it may be.
One last question from me. When I was looking around at the exhibition the other day, I thought the only piece of metal smithing in the show was this beautiful reliquary here. But actually, there's pieces in this box. There's other pieces.
It's in there. It's still there.
Yeah, you have to look for them. They're still. Yeah.
They're still there. They're in the box. The teapot around the corner. The knife. The alteration of the knife and fork.
Maybe you could say something about your love of decorative.
Of decorative.
Decoration, yeah. Ornamentation.
I like ornamentation. I love. I think I have a penchant for the Victorian. I spent a good part of my childhood in England, and you go to a cathedral, and it's just it's ornament on top of ornament on top of ornament, and then the English style. I have a decorative book on English style, and they are not afraid of giant floral wallpaper with giant floral. I mean, it's pattern on pattern on pattern, and I'm sort of drawn to that aesthetic. Sometimes I wish I had a contemporary home that had one object on a table and nothing else, but I'm not sure it would really work. So even in these sort of these controlled pieces, there's a lot going on, even in those little cells. There's a lot of ornamentation. Some of it's more streamlined, but that's a lot of ornamentation. So I think I just have a natural penchant for that. And a history, and a memorializing. I've taken many of the things from my family. Sarah has my mother's cigarette holder. That's my mother's carving set. So those things, mean something to me in my life, and they have a history, and I like to do something with it and pass it on.
Well, do you want to say a little bit about? I like the media whore, and I was teasing you the other day about this. You're calling it new media, but really, all of your new media is found and recycled old media.
I know, it's weird.
Old stuff.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. I mean, we live in this day and age of instant images and instant gratification, and send it out and get feedback, and tweeting and Tumblring, and just on and on and on and on. It seems very ephemeral, although it lasts forever, apparently. But there's still sort of something ephemeral about it and fleeting. And I think that, first of all, A, it's tongue-in-cheek. B, it's a reference to all the materials I work with. I think that having us in this sense of accelerated acceptance of new things kind of liberates me to be able to change and do many and new and varied things as well. So it works for me and against me, if that makes any sense whatsoever. There is a catalog for the
I
show.
was gonna say
And
that.
Catherine wrote the foreword to it. She has a really nice take on that part. Catherine is the curator at the Houston Center.
Catherine Hall.
Catherine
Hall.
And she has a really nice take on that idea.
Well, does anybody have any questions for Edward?
I got a comment.
Okay.
Yes?
You know, it's a good thing that art is in your hands. I was gonna say compulsive, obsessive, but this replaces Ritalin for you, I think. There's this push-pull with volume and weight, because when you look at a lot of these pieces, you're just wondering, is that light? Can I just lift it? And then at the same time, you're wondering if that thing falls, is it gonna make a dent in the concrete floor? So, what do you, when you're working this, do you think about this idea of volume and weight?
I don't know. I think, I have a training that is about volume and balance and I don't know that I consciously make certain decisions. At some point, things just happen because it's part of the sense of that's the way they need to happen. I was thinking about this too. My brother often asks me, "Well, where do you get your ideas from?" And I was thinking, well, I would say to him, the same way you get ideas about city planning. He sits on the city council. You have experience and you have knowledge and you're trained in that. So I'm trained in a vocabulary of the visual, and so I think some of that I don't think about, quite frankly.
Any other questions?
I'm more impressed than I've ever been, and I've seen several of your shows, with the amount of emphasis you have on texture and form, as well as the volume and weight, all of that stuff. And I'm also intrigued because you brought up the subject of going from sort of chaos to randomness to bringing it to order to almost compulsive order, all of that. Is there a range in your work, and do you acknowledge a range between what most people would consider as creative expression, and maybe the next level is drafting, maybe the next level is craft, maybe the next level is art, and then finally fine art, or something along those lines? And where do you find your work fits into that spectrum?
To make a lot, something good happens eventually, or you hope so anyway. I certainly make things that are like high design, I have always no, that's not true. There are delineations. When I make jewelry, there was a lot of jewelry that was fashionable. And it was made for the purpose of these earrings will go with anybody's jeans or a little black dress, and they'll sell like hotcakes. And then there is something that's more challenging. And not everybody's gonna like that. And God, that's made from a material that jewelry is not made from. And so that goes to another place. And when I started doing that, I always thought of that as art. And I think that for me, art and craft are synonymous. And I don't think one exists without the other. And if it does, it's not very good. Because, I think, art needs to have good craftsmanship.
Mm-hmm.
It just needs to be well crafted. And there are skills and there's a vocabulary for that, and that it takes years to master. And so I think that answered some of your questions.
And follow up. Part of it sounds like intentionality.
Yeah.
Where you start and
Yeah.
what your intentions are for each particular piece, and then your materials are from a lot of random sources, so how they eventually become, but intentionality.
I think
has a lot to
intention
do
has a
with it.
lot to do with it. I think that's a huge part of it.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
So I'm just curious, when you start to make a piece, you have something in mind that you want it to look like. How often does the piece end up looking like thought it was gonna look when you originally envisioned it?
More often than not. Sometimes it's way better than I thought it would look. It's like, wow, that's really good. Yeah. And I didn't think it'd be that good, you know? And sometimes it's like, maybe we'll try that again another way, you know? Most of the time it works. If I have a good way, I mean, I think about things a long time. Things seem spontaneous, but they've been brewing. So if I've gotten to the point where I'm making it, chances are I've got it pretty well worked out in my head.
Is that something that's developed over your career?
I think it comes from problem solving. I mean, I did space planning for years, and so it's
Not outer space.
no physical planning of architectural space. And people always have what I call the desire for 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. And I got to make them all fit in there. And so it's this juggling to make everything fit like a puzzle. And I would do that in my head, and then I could sit down and draw it out in a matter of very quickly. But I had it all figured out before sort of it happened. So I think that happens a lot.
I think we have time for one more question. Somebody? Yes?
Tell us about the teddy bear.
The
I mean,
teddy?
does it seem to be Oh, wait, I think you are a teddy bear.
It's sort of a mood piece too, like the doll, and he's a found teddy bear, and he was adorable, and he is called Ursus maritimus, which is the taxonomic name, my love taxonomy, of the polar bear. And then his other two names are petroleum acclimate. So he's a little bit of a climate warming statement. And he's covered in a petroleum product, which is a plasticizer. And it's if you read the list of ingredients, it's all petroleum distillates that are, kind of toxic. But that's kind of what he's all about. But he's warm and fun at the same time.
Are you making any political statements this time in any of your work? You've had the bishop's crozier at times. And you've had other
I
pieces
think I've gone more abstract.
more abstract.
Yeah.
about this piece in the corner?
That one is about death.
Yeah.
It's we have to go there occasionally. Yeah.
There's nothing political behind
No.
that one? Okay.
Sometimes the need, I have made things that have some, fairly heavy political content, and I think right now I'm focusing more on form and color and texture and more of those types of concepts.
One more
With
question.
the cardboard pieces, what drives it? The form, and then you find the age for it, or you look at the age and then find the form?
What drives it? It's both. It's just both. Yeah, it's how it flows together.
Well, I want to thank Edward, and the opening is officially from 5 to 7, and so he'll be here to answer all your questions. And thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Victoria. Okay.